the neck of some future manager or commission. Thank you.
James Fraser.
Chair Wall, Vice Chair Hatfield Hyde, and members of the commission. My name is James Fraser, and I'm the Oregon Policy Director at Trout Unlimited. TU is a nonprofit dedicated to conserving cold water fish and their habitats. We have about 20 full-time staff in the state, most of whom are project managers that spend their days restoring fish habitat, addressing fish passage issues, and working collaboratively with water right holders to put water in stream to benefit native species. I submitted a letter on the agency request budget to accompany these comments and just want to highlight 3 points. Number one, we enthusiastically support POP 101 and related proposals for using new transient lodging funds, especially including the components related to Klamath fishery introduction, Klamath bull trout conservation, and adding staff biologists statewide. The fish screen maintenance item is timely and important because we've all seen the rapid response of native species to dam removal, and funding this ODFW position will make sure that screen diversions are fully operational to keep those fish in the river and out of canals. TU advocated during the budget process that ODFW fund an in-stream flow restoration position in Northeast Oregon, and that isn't included here, but I would also plug the idea that at least some of the 21 new habitat biologists include flow restoration in their work plans. In places like the John Day, TU would love to have a go-to person at the agency who can help us find and build voluntary transactions with landowners. Number two, Trout Unlimited supports POP 116 related to a $9 million fish passage bond because it continues the state's momentum on improving access for aquatic species to high-quality habitats in cold water refugia. We would like to see that number be a little higher since there's more than 3 times this amount proposed for the next hatchery maintenance bond, but $9 million will fund a lot of good work. And number 3, we have concerns about POP 117 related to hatchery capacity in the Umpqua Basin because the Rock Creek site faces significant challenges. There are also numerous important unknowns in these materials about the proposed South Umpqua facility, including its location and availability of a water right. By proposing to spend this funding at both Rock Creek and an unspecified location in the South Umpqua, ODFW is necessarily choosing to not spend it, making other facilities more resilient, prepared for the future, or capable of producing improved hatchery fish. That information and the reasoning behind it should be provided at this stage. The estimated cost of $76 million is approximately 1/3 the cost to address all deferred maintenance at state-owned facilities in Oregon. A written analysis of the 5 factors developed during the hatchery resilience process would shed light on why the proposed action is preferable to options which would improve other existing facilities, or perhaps a combination of facilities inside and outside the basin. To be clear, we are not advocating that ODFW choose not to replace that capacity somewhere. But the agency has maintained hatchery fish programs in the Umpqua Basin without the requested facilities for almost 6 years, and we don't see a convincing justification in the ARB that this POP is the best option. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Srishti Kamal.
Good morning, Chair Wall, Vice Chair Hatfield Hyde, Director Colbert, and members of the Commission. I'm Srishti Kamal, Deputy Director at Western Environmental Law Center, and a member of the Oregon Wildlife Coalition. As you know, WWAL co-led the 1.25% for wildlife campaign with our partners, and so today I wanted to provide comments on the POPs associated with House Bill 4134. WWAL strongly supports the POPs on wildlife connectivity funding, wildlife stewardship, and the OCRF, but I'll limit my comments to the larger SWAP implementation POP today. When we started the campaign 6 years ago, we had one goal: secure dedicated funding for historically unfunded or underfunded at-risk species and their habitats, and in the process, benefit all wildlife. But it was hard to imagine how to translate that vision into reality through specific investments for this scale of funding. So when ODFW shared their proposal for the 0.9% of the TLT funding, frankly, I didn't know what to expect because we were coming from, as noted earlier, a place of extreme scarcity to a place of abundance. So let me just start by saying that I was very impressed with how ODFW put this POP together through a very collaborative budgeting process, even when under tremendous time constraints. I've communicated as much to Deputy Director Clements and wanted to do the same to you. First, within the know, plan, and do structure, We are particularly excited to see bolstering of staff capacity through investments in diversity biologists and habitat biologists. This helps balance ODF&W staff composition to meet the agency's full mandate of managing all of Oregon's wildlife. Effectiveness of these positions will ultimately depend on the scope of their work, but we anticipate that they will fill knowledge gap by conducting research, monitoring trends, and then implementing on-ground restoration projects. Project implementation funding without adequate staff capacity to execute it would otherwise not be very effective. And hopefully these positions will also open doors to opportunities in accessing more federal grants. Secondly, the POP strikes a balance between immediate and specific investments in certain species and habitat, while also making broader and long-term ecosystem level investments. For example, in this POP, we see investments into species like Doran salamander, burrowing owl, and Pacific fisher. And at the same time, there's coastal habitat monitoring from a climate lens and habitat scale investments in Eastern Oregon bioregions. We anticipate some of these investments to shift over time based on emerging needs and knowledge gained from the know and do part of the investments. We had one initial concern with an investment associated with Chinook hatchery for orcas, but that has been addressed by ODF&W and we very much appreciate it. So I'll just conclude by saying that I look forward to working with the agency and our partners in the long budget process ahead of us to see these POPs across the finish line. Thank you.
Thank you, Suristi. Kirk Blaine, and then Charles Gear and Jennifer Fairbrother.
Chair Wall, Commissioners, Director Colbert. For the record, my name is Kirk Blaine. I'm the Senior Program Manager for Wild Fish at the Wild Salmon Center, and I live in Roseburg. Wild Salmon Center is a nonprofit organization based in Oregon that focuses on protecting and conserving salmon strongholds, where wild salmon populations are strong and diverse, and where habitats are highly functioning and intact. Wild Salmon Center supports maintaining base level funding for ODFW's programs, particularly funding to support Oregon Coast coho salmon strongholds. And we support the significant new funding available through House Bill 4134 under POP 101 to add habitat and wildlife diversity biologists. However, we have significant concerns with POP 117, investing in sustainable hatchery capacity for the Umpqua Basin. Any investments in hatchery management must be grounded in science, aligned with the hatchery resilience assessment, and represent a strategic investment for the future of all Oregonians. The proposed rebuild of Rock Creek Hatchery in POP 117 does not meet those standards. During the hatchery resiliency assessment completed in 2025, Rock Creek Hatchery received the lowest overall score among 14 state-owned hatcheries. The assessment identified significant challenges associated with the water quality and quantity, infrastructure costs, and long-term climate resilience. Additionally, the department has not provided an evaluation of alternative approaches to a proposed alternative approaches to a proposed rebuild that were identified in the hatchery resilience assessment. So just shut it on. Nor have they presented the full scope and long-term costs associated.
Try that. See if that makes you. Everybody else.
Additionally, the department has not provided an evaluation of alternative approaches to a proposed rebuild that were identified in the hatchery resiliency assessment, nor have they presented the full scope and long-term costs of the proposed assessment or investment. For these reasons, Wild Salmon Center recommends that ODFW Commission oppose POP 117 and ask the staff to evaluate alternatives identified in the hatchery resiliency assessment that can achieve the department's goals without rebuilding large-scale infrastructure at Rock Creek. Thank you for the time and the opportunity to comment today.
Thank you, Kirk, and sorry for the mess
Thank
up.
you.
It's okay.
I'm glad it's not your first time testifying. Like, oh my gosh.
We'll go to Charles Gear then. Thank you, Kirk. Charles?
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, but barely.
Oh, well, I'll try and use my river voice and speak up. Um, Chair Wall, Vice Chair Hatfield Hyde, Commissioners, and Director Colbert. My name is Charles Gear. I'm a resident of Talent, Oregon, and a river steward for the Native Fish Society. I would like to respectfully request that the Commission remove the Rock Creek Hatchery Policy Option Package from the proposed agency request budget and defer decisions on new hatchery infrastructure and operations until the Coastal Multi-Species Conservation and Management Plan, CMP, review is complete. From a wild fish management perspective, it's hard to justify a rebuild of Rock Creek Hatchery. Wild spring Chinook in the North Umpqua have been in decline, and the straying of hatchery fish has directly contributed to that decline. It is likely that there will be changes to spring Chinook hatchery production when the CMP is reviewed. By contrast, wild winter steelhead populations have grown since ending hatchery supplementation in 1993. The 2011 to 2020 average returns were the largest of any decade in the 80 years that those fish have been counted. The data seems to reinforce the idea that the best hatchery is a healthy river. Since we're talking budget allocation today, let's analyze this policy option package from a financial perspective. The state of Oregon spent nearly $1 million to analyze the state hatchery system less than 2 years ago. That assessment found Rock Creek Hatchery to be the lowest performing, worst return on investment in the state hatchery system. This is all coming at a time when ODFW has experienced a budget shortfall, causing the reduction of critical monitoring programs, closing the Salmon River Hatchery, and the elimination of operating funds for Rock Creek Hatchery. So we spent a lot of money to analyze the hatchery system and guide our financial investments. And in the face of a budget shortfall, we're looking to spend dwindling funds on the worst investment in the entire state. This simply does not add up. I'll ask this commission again to please wait on committing large sums of money to this project until we evaluate what hatchery programs are even sustainable in our beloved North Umpqua River. Thank you for your time and consideration.
We will go on to Jennifer Fairbrother. The next three after that, Kelly Peterson, Emily Sullivan, Danielle Mosier.
Thank you, Chair Wall
So-
and members of, oh,
We can't hear you, Jennifer, just a second. Is she on there, Michelle? Jennifer, try one more time to speak.
sure thing. Sound check, sound check.
It's on. Okay, we can hear you.
Okay, wonderful. Chair Wall and members of the commission, for the record, my name is Jennifer Fairbrother, and I'm the Legislative and Policy Director at the Native Fish Society. We are asking the commission to remove the Rock Creek Hatchery Package, also known as POP 117, from the agency request budget. I want to start today with a question. If you were going to rebuild one hatchery in this state, would you choose the one your own agency ranks dead last? Because that is exactly what this proposal is asking. As Charles mentioned, ODFW's own independent hatchery assessment rated Rock Creek at the bottom of all the state-owned hatcheries. Before the fire, it operated some of the most expensive programs in the system on a per fish harvested basis. None of that is our characterization, it is the department's. Along with that, the costs keep climbing. The assessment from 2 years ago found that at least $251 million is needed just to maintain the existing system. Of that, it was estimated replacing Umpqua capacity would be $45 million. Today, the request before you is $76 million. That is nearly a third of the entire system's identified need just for a single basin. This proposal also comes with an extraordinary number of unknowns. The FEMA funding and 10% cost match are not guaranteed. The ongoing operational funding is undetermined. The water rights needed for the South Umpqua facility, how they'd be acquired, what they might cost, unknown. And what contingency exists if either party in the partnership agreement is unable to sustain operations in the long term? If the commission approves Prop 117 today, this is likely the only chance you will have to engage substantively with this proposal. So that's the hard part. And here's the hopeful part. Oregon already has a recipe for abundant fish, and it isn't more concrete. After a near total collapse in the 90s, wild coho are now returning to Oregon's coastal rivers in numbers we have not seen in decades. And these runs are almost entirely self-sustaining. That recovery came from this agency focusing on the health of the system itself, on habitat restoration and access, on wild fish management, and on monitoring to guide sustainable harvest of wild fish. The principle is simple. If we invest in the productivity of the natural system, it will sustain itself. Unfortunately, we do not have time to invest in the wrong things. Across Oregon, wild salmon and steelhead are listed, depleted, or in decline, and the window to recover them is closing. Every dollar this commission endorses needs to count. Oregon has the recipe for abundant fish and sustainable harvest fisheries. Let's invest in that. Thank you.
Kelly Peterson, then Emily Sullivan, then Danielle Mosier. After that,
Oh, sorry. I thought you were going to say some other names. I'm so sorry. Can you hear me okay, Chair Wall?
yes, go ahead.
Okay. Good morning, Chair Wall, Vice Chair Hatfield-Hyde, Director Colbert, and Commissioners. My name is Kelly Peterson. I'm the Oregon State Director for Humane World for Animals. I first want to thank you and staff for your continued support for the Wildlife Coexistence Package, which was included in 4134. And I also it goes back a ways, but I want to thank and acknowledge Commissioner Laphart for originally creating the Wildlife Response Work Group back in 2021. And as members of that work group, we already submitted our comments into the record. So I just wanted to be here today virtually to touch on a few things, including what the original vision was behind this program. And even today, I remember sitting in those work group meetings. It was right after COVID, and we were in Salem, and I can still hear Bob Salinger's voice, who was always sitting to my right. And at one point in maybe our second meeting, after we spent some time talking about some of the larger issues and brainstorming solutions, Bob just said, in his very Bob way, only he could say it like tongue in cheek. And he said, you know, instead of moving words around and ideas into different columns or categories, we were working on the whiteboard. He said, you know, what we really need to do is just think bigger and more holistically, something along those lines. But it was that reflection from Bob that kind of opened up and allowed us to get to the root of why we were all there. And it expanded the conversation in the work group. And then the result was that shared vision that ultimately led to the Wildlife Coexistence Program. And that was with leadership from Commissioner Laphart and ODF&W staff on the work group. And it was a recognition that coexistence and a proactive shift is about investing. And it was in people and partnerships and coordination and education training, all the things, all the support systems needed to help communities live alongside wildlife. And we've had the opportunity to see what proactive coexistence can look like when we invest in those partnerships and communities. And like just a few weeks ago with the third annual Coyote Palooza in Portland, where more than 1,500 people attended to learn about coyote behavior and preventing conflict and keeping pets and people safe. And it was a simple message: coyotes live here. And to me, that event is a perfect example of the original vision behind the program. It was like bringing together agencies, nonprofits, communities, and even neighborhood associations to build an understanding to share practical tools for coexistence. So I'm grateful for the direction of the package and that staff are already planning for implementation as resources and positions are established. So I just wanted to thank you, collectively, the staff and commission for the leadership and the opportunity to testify here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. We'll go on to Emily and then Danielle Mosier, Jake Crawford. After that, David Moskowitz and Larry Phillips. So Emily.
Good start. Hi, good morning, Director, Chair, Vice Chair, and Commissioners. My name is Emily Sullivan. I'm here today representing Think Wild and speaking on behalf of Oregon's licensed wildlife rehabilitation centers, including Think Wild, Bird Alliance of Oregon, Cascades Raptor Center, Chintimney Wildlife Center, Blue Mountain Wildlife, the Oregon Wildlife Rehabilitation Association, and the Wildlife Center of the North Coast. So first, we just want to thank the legislator, ODFW, and the commission for helping to make 4134 a reality. It was a really historic investment that creates an opportunity for us to strengthen wildlife rehabilitation and coexistence efforts across Oregon for many years to come. So thank you so much for that. As you develop the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center grant program, we really encourage you to try to prioritize flexible operating support. Wildlife rehab centers are already providing many of these essential wildlife services every single day. But staffing, utilities, transportation, facilities operations, and administrative capacity are often our greatest funding needs and are absolutely essential for us to be able to deliver wildlife care, public assistance, and conflict response as well. We also really encourage the Commission to try to create an accessible and predictable grant program by prioritizing multi-year awards whenever possible, trying to avoid match funding requirements and trying to utilize upfront funding rather than reimbursement-only models. Many rehab centers operate with very limited cash reserves, so any kind of reimbursement structure can unfortunately unintentionally create a barrier to participation for many organizations. And finally, we encourage ODFW to dedicate a portion of the Wildlife Coexistence and Stewardship Fund towards training, coordination, and technical assistance, which can be delivered in partnership with licensed wildlife rehabilitation centers. So rehab centers have really extensive expertise and experience in responding to injured, orphaned, and conflict wildlife. And we can really help to provide in-depth training, response protocols, public education, and coordination with ODFW staff, Oregon State Police, ODOT, dispatchers, local governments, and other agencies as well. All of these recommendations align really closely with the findings of the Wildlife Response Work Group and the original vision behind Oregon's Wildlife Coexistence Program. So by investing in existing rehabilitation capacity and these collaborative coexistence efforts that we already have and making the funding accessible, 4134 can really deliver immediate benefits for wildlife, the community, and all of the responding agencies as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Appreciate it. Danielle Mosier, Jake Crawford, and then David Moskowitz. So Danielle.
Wonderful. Good morning, Chair Wall, Vice Chair Hatfield Hyde, Director Colbert, and members of the Commission. My name is Danielle Moser, and I am the Wildlife Program Manager for Oregon Wild. I appreciate the opportunity to testify on ODFW's requested budget for the 2027 to 2029 biennium. I'm especially excited about the POPs to support implementation of House Bill 4134. I haven't had a chance to speak before the Commission since the passage of this legislation. I know my colleague Shristi has, but I wanted to also take a brief moment to just express my gratitude to the incredible coalition, partners, legislators, and members of the public who showed up and spoke out in support of this historic legislation. It's truly transformative, and we cannot wait to see all the important work ODFW is going to do to recover our most vulnerable and imperiled fish, wildlife, and habitats. And thank you, though I haven't been at the hearings. I appreciate all the comments from commissioners and just the gratitude. So thank you. It is definitely well received. So that being said, we are very pleased with ODFW's framework for how to spend this new revenue, especially with POP 101, which I'm going to primarily focus on, especially the robust expansion of wildlife diversity biologists and habitat specialists across all regions of the state. It strikes a good balance between hiring much needed staff to conduct that field research, collect relevant data, with the on-the-ground project implementation to restore vulnerable habitats that support many species. It's my understanding that, initially more time and attention and resources will be spent on that information gathering and the planning. So I guess the know and the plan part of what Sean mentioned. But as priorities are set and needs are determined for species, then more money will go to that on the ground restoration, or sea restoration for that matter, in the doing part. And so related to that, one recommendation I have just for the use of these POP funds is for agency staff just to remain nimble and ready to make necessary adjustments as needed. We live in this ever-changing environment, and the needs of our at-risk species is also changing. And so we want to make sure that agency staff and leadership are able to pivot if a course of action is not proving effective. The ultimate goal here, of course, is to help our populations of all fish and wildlife thrive, and really combat the extinction crisis. And so if something isn't working, we want a framework, we want that structure, but also to make sure that things have enough flexibility so that you can pivot so that it's the most effective. And finally, I want to thank ODFW leadership for pulling back on the specific allocation for the Chinook resident orca program. I agree that more time and thought is needed just to go into the specifics and ensure that any money invested into this will be the most effective to get the solutions we need for orcas. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Danielle. Jake Crawford. Jake?
All right, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Great, thank you. Good morning, Chair Wall, Vice Chair Hatfield-Hyde, Commissioners, Director Colbert. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Jake Crawford, and I'm a volunteer board member of the Steamboaters. For nearly 60 years, the Steamboaters have worked to advocate for the North Umpqua River and its wild fish for current and future generations. Our request is that you reject 117 and the proposed rebuild of Rock Creek Hatchery. I submitted written testimony, which should be in your packet, so I'll be brief today. I have to say, I'm really encouraged by all of the great work that ODF&W is doing across the state. Sitting in now and listening to all the projects that are going on, I recognize it's a big lift by the department, and to balance the state's natural resources with user needs, along with the financial considerations and the limitations that come with this responsibility. At the same time, we're also concerned about this Rock Creek Hatchery proposal, both for the known ecological and financial ramifications, especially given the backlog of deferred maintenance across the state and other competing things that the state needs to fund. Everything that we've seen leading up to the Archie Creek fire and today points to the same conclusion, that this is not a sensible place to rebuild and it's not a good investment. It's been noted by many people here today that ODF&W's own hatchery resilience assessment ranked Rock Creek last among the 14 state hatcheries it evaluated. It was identified as the costliest facility, the least resilient to climate change, and the most vulnerable to environmental hazards. So for me, this does not pass simple financial costs and risk assessments to spend millions of dollars to rebuild. We know that the challenges of low summer flows, lethal water temperatures, and ongoing climate risk are only going to further challenge this facility. We ask you to oppose POP 117, and we encourage a no-build option. We'd like to have the department and the commission take a serious look at the alternatives that have already been identified in ODF&W's own assessment. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Jake. We will go then to David Moskowitz, Larry Phillips, Jim Muck, and after that, the next three are Story Warren, Amy Patrick, Todd Atkins. So David, you'll have 3 minutes.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Oh, that's great. Thank you very much. David Moskowitz here, and a pleasure to be able to speak with you today about the ODFW budget. I would ask that this POP 117 be sidelined. It's really contrary to the work that was done with the hatchery resilience and assessment that many of us participated in for quite a long time. The investments being made in the draft POP are really investments in concrete and rebar and stainless steel, and they're not investments in the natural world. The Umpqua Basin is one of the most diverse salmon watersheds in the world. Kelly Coates, who's with the Cow Creek Tribe, did a 2012 master's thesis on the Umpqua, and she noted the presence of all 7 Pacific salmonids, as well as sturgeon, smolt, and lamprey. We need to build on this diversity and this abundance. There's a whole bunch of investments that can be made. One would be to invest in cold water in the Umpqua. The main Umpqua, it can be a hazardous migratory corridor. There's cold water refugia along the main stem Umpqua that's unprotected. The angling has been closed down there, but the cold water sources need to be protected in the long term. That's one investment. The decommissioning of the North Umpqua hydro projects, Soda Springs and the lakes up above, will in 2038 have a new license. It's time to get rid of those facilities so we can have colder water coming from the upper watershed. Winchester Dam will come out. ODFW needs a plan to be able to count fish and survey spawning fish in the watershed. We need investments in that now. The Archie Creek fire recovery is ongoing and needs investment as well. Further, there needs to be coordination with the CMP, the Coastal Management Plan, and it's going to be out of sync. This hatchery rebuild proposal will be out of sync with that. We should be investing in Stan Petrowski in the South Umpqua to rebuild resiliency and abundance there. Having spent a lot of time on this hatchery assessment, I can say that this result of putting money into Rock Creek is upside down and backwards from that process. And from a legal perspective, it's arbitrary and capricious. I urge you to drop this proposal from this draft, this budget, the agency request budget. And I really appreciate the time. And I would like to also acknowledge Commissioner Labhart for his long service trying to increase the budgets for this agency. And they go way, way back. And he's been at the table the whole time. I really admire you for that and thank you for that. And I really appreciate being able to testify virtually. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. We'll go on to Larry Phillips and then Jim Muck and then Story Warren.
Good
Go ahead,
morning.
Larry.
I'm coming through okay?
Yes.
Great. Good morning, Chair Wall, Commissioners, Director Colbert, and staff. My name is Larry Phillips, and I represent the American Sport Fishing Association, where I cover state and federal policy on the West Coast. I appreciate an opportunity here to share a few thoughts about the agency requested budget, and we'll continue to engage on the specific budget proposals as they develop. But I wanted to share a few broader observations and reaffirm our commitment to working with ODFW. We believe that a fully funded ODFW is essential to responsibly managing Oregon's fish and wildlife resources, supporting staff, and serving the public. One of the things that resonated with me is throughout this morning's presentations, we've heard that partnerships are critical to ODFW's mission. We certainly share that view. We value our partnership with ODFW and the Commission and the many organizations that are working to conserve Oregon's fish and wildlife resources while maintaining and improving the quality of Oregon's fishing and hunting opportunities. ASA and our partners have consistently supported strengthening ODFW's funding base through incremental recreational license fees, working to address loopholes in things like sport fish restoration at the federal level, the new transient lodging tax, and continued investments from the general fund and the lottery fund, and then other areas of possible opportunity. And this diversified funding approach recognizes that the services that ODFW provides extends to all Oregonians, and that the funding of ODFW should not continue to fall disproportionately on fishers and hunters. We're also encouraged to hear earlier today that the recreational fishing license revenue has increased. We believe that the success reflects the investments made by the legislature to improve fishing opportunities and increase fish abundance. And this demonstrates that strategic investments in fisheries deliver benefits for conservation, anglers, and Oregon's long-term financial sustainability. Just by way of background, recreational fishing generates about $2.5 billion in economic output in Oregon, supports about 17,000 jobs, and results in about $160 million in local and state taxes. Those economic benefits depend on healthy fish populations and quality fishing opportunities. So as you make these difficult budget decisions, we respectfully encourage you to prioritize investments that increase fish abundance, support salmon and steelhead recovery, improve habitat and fish passage, strengthen fisheries monitoring, and modernize fish hatchery infrastructure, including the Rock Creek Hatchery. We believe that these priorities are fully consistent with ODFW's mission and will provide lasting benefits for Oregon's fish and wildlife communities. Again, we appreciate the time to share these thoughts and look forward to working with you and the legislature and others as this process continues. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Larry. We'll go on then to Jim Muck, and after that, Story Warren, Amy Patrick, Todd Atkins. So Jim.
Chair Wall, fellow commissioners, Director Colbert, I'm here to support for the support of Rock Creek Hatchery, Elsie Hatchery, and also for the reinstatement of the BPA funds for the Columbia River. My name is Jim Muck. I'm an ODFW biologist for 28 years. I work for NOAA Fisheries for 11 years, and I'm with the Oregon Angler Alliance now. I am a volunteer. I wanted to clarify today, right off the bat, the coho recovery that has occurred on the coast. There's a lot of information out there, and you'll be hearing some tests today, misinformation. Recovery began with ESA listing in 1997. Historical harvest was 80 to 90%. When that ESA listing occurred, agencies developed Amendment 13. Amendment 13 is weak stock management. It allowed a minimum of 8% harvest to go out and capture other more abundant stocks. And as we get more smolts back, more adults back, more productivity, the matrix then moved forward to a more increased harvest. The highest harvest that you can get now is now 46%. This year, we're harvesting at 30%. 83,000 to 86,000 adults fully seed coastal ESU. We are now fully seeded. We're receiving about 200,000 a year. What happened then is because we curtailed harvest, we allowed non-adipose fin to go back to the North Coast and fill Tillamook, Nehalem, Elsie, some of those other North Basin streams that were being over-harvested from the Columbia River stocks. That fully seeded the streams. We have not seen much occurring in the freshwater from restoration or hatcheries removal, as you often hear people say. That is why I say we are at full seeding, and yet we have not seen it. When we wrote NOAA wrote the 5-year stock review and the NOAA recovery plan, which I was involved in, we were not able to show increases at the population level or habitat surveys that showed increases in abundance. Professor Robert Lasky wrote a blog on May 16, 2026. It's called The Salmon Recovery Industrial Complex, 10 Policy Realities. I really would suggest that all of you read that. It really talks about what I'm talking about today. The last thing I want to just mention is that, yeah, I had it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. We'll go to Amy Patrick, Todd Atkins, Steve Hagan. And if others of you in the room want to come up now, that's just fine too.
I know. Experience. I think I have a big enough voice. That one should work. Yes. Okay. Good morning, Chair Wall, Vice Chair Hatfield Hyde, members of the Commission, Director Colbert. For the record, my name is Amy Patrick, and I'm here this morning representing the Oregon chapter of the Wild Sheep Foundation. As has been noted, we had such a strong coalition on the work for House Bill 4134, and I want to note that Oregon Wild Sheep Foundation was a part of that broad coalition. That was a multi-year. Definitely don't need to hear my own voice going back to me. Excuse me, sorry. This work was doubly important for Oregon wild sheep because Rocky Mountain bighorn sheep is a key swap species. And so we've been very engaged in the the budget process and the allocation of the 4134 funds because of that. I'm here today to say that we are generally supportive of what you've seen today in the ARB. I have 3 qualifiers that I'd like to talk about really quickly though. And that is, the first one is that Rocky Mountain Bighorn sheep did not receive any funding in the 4134 allocations. In lieu of that funding, we've requested ODFW staff to prioritize the updating of the 2003 Bighorn Sheep and Rocky Mountain Goat Management Plan. In the 23 years since the plan has been last updated, the data collection that has been happening on the landscape on our North American herds has produced a tremendous amount of data and science that needs to be incorporated into Oregon's management of our herds. And so we're encouraged by the conversations that we've had with leadership and staff on prioritizing that plan, and just want to call that out for you. The second qualifier I have is that, you know, as we look at this, the allocation, and we see the FTE number, a lot of times that can be a little bit of a shock because it's such a large number, as we've talked about previously, coming from operating in a place of scarcity. However, we recognize the fact that to accomplish all these things on the ground, we do need that additional staffing. My qualifier on that is that we're encouraged to see that about 60% of the funds is going directly on the ground, while 40% is going to the FTE. We encourage that same kind of balance as we go forward into future biennium and future planning with these funds, that we maintain that larger half of that balance to on the ground funding. And then the last is also because we have all of this, these funds going out, we've heard about all these different POPs and priorities and specializations, and it's a lot to keep track of. We really recommend that the agency have a robust reporting matrix, both to the commission, to stakeholders, that we can see and adaptively manage over time. So when we come back 2 years and we're looking at what do we do with it in the next biennium with these monies, we know where it's been really effective, maybe where it hasn't been as effective, but everybody who's worked together for this feels as though we're all a part of this kind of accountability and transparency, and have a lot of faith in the future going forward. And the last thing I'll just say is I look forward to the legislative session next year and advocating for, you know, playing the defense and advocating for the ARB. So I appreciate the time today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Go ahead, Todd.
Thank you. Look at how easy this is gonna be. Here, absolutely. She's 100% right. Obviously, Amy's been mentioned here today. The outstanding work she did on behalf of OHA cannot be denied. 4134 is a celebration, right? And that's where we are at OHA right now. We understand the next biennium is going to tell us a lot about this budget and where we end up with on the ground projects. And as Amy said, OHA likewise is comfortable understanding that the majority of the money is going to end up on the ground. We got a lot of work to do with the governor's office. We got a lot of work to do with the legislature. And then we got boots on the ground we got to worry about for 2 solid years. So trust was mentioned. OHA and ODFW have a very trustful relationship, right? That's where we are right now. More than happy to help get this across the finish line right here. And more than happy to continue this important work to make sure we follow through in the legislature this year and see where we are 2 years from now. How do we need to reallocate? How do we need to refocus? But right now, we feel great about it. Everybody should feel great about it. So that's our position.
Thank you, Todd. Steve.
Chair Wall, Vice Chair Hatfield Hyde, Director Colbert, and Commissioners. It's been a long time, but I wanted to point out first, thank you very much for being gracious and opening your ranch for us to see. We got to see a lot of stuff that a lot of the citizens of the state of Oregon will never see in their lifetime. We heard John talk about telling the story. I think we need to continue to tell the story. A bunch of people here make that happen. Wanted to point out a couple things. Really excited about the investment in reintroduction of sharp-tailed grouse and really excited about the investment towards sage grouse. This state has a heritage of hunting sage grouse, which we're extremely proud of. As we've said before, looked at as a gold standard in the West. I don't believe there will be a sharp-tailed grouse season in my lifetime, but that doesn't mean the planning or the heritage of my kid and his kids isn't important. I find it extremely important. You heard the word exciting. I would offer this is an exciting time. It really is a transformational time for this agency. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Steve, and for hanging with us all day
And
yesterday.
thank you for your leadership from OHA too.
Yes.
Thank you. It's been important.
We can go now to Monica Thomasy, Stan Steele, and Alex Hartson.
You hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
It's so scary.
Great, thank you. So hello, Chair Wall, Vice Chair Hyde, Commissioners, Director Colbert. My name is Monica Thomasy. I'm retired from Federal Science and Management Program Manager positions focused on biodiversity conservation. And I was part of the coalition to pass 4134. Woo! So after I retired, of course. So I offer 5 thoughts I'll try to get through here. So first, even though this TLT source of funds is something to celebrate, the decisions on how to spend the funds are serious. As for many species, the extinction risk is very high. The department will be pressured by diverse interests, discouraged by social, economic, and political costs, seduced by what looks good in the short run, and may run into litigation for what is or is not decided. Talking and listening is important. Going forward, I recommend employing a structured decision-making process for processes, perhaps contracting with third-party experts. Objective techniques for rating or ranking across the hundreds of species in need can be used to prioritize conservation investments. This objective, explicit, repeatable, evidence-based decision-making will support your professionals in the agency. My second point, regarding monitoring, I think it's important to fund all 3 levels of monitoring for conservation. First, monitoring planning and implementation of the projects, then effectiveness of the projects, and lastly, most importantly, the response of the species. If ODFW doesn't include a system of monitoring for these last 2, the optics will be that ODFW is managing for planning and implementation as the desired outcome. When ultimately the work is about figuring out if what you are doing is actually working. Third, some of these species are in decline due to contaminants, indirect and direct. And I'm not seeing that addressed in your plan. I recommend you hire at least 1 contaminant biologist, because without addressing that threat, some of these species are going to continue to decline. Habitat restoration is not going to cut it. Fourth, due to the success of ODFW getting these funds and OSP for law enforcement funds, the legislature and the governor's office are tempted to cut general funds in response. We need ODFW and Oregon State Police to get more accomplished, not keep the status quo. So these funds must be considered as additional, not substitute funding. Please identify and communicate with your allies what needs to be done in terms of education and awareness building with the legislature and the governor's office about the severity of the situation, and the fact that if there had been enough funds to resolve the problems outlined in 4134, there would not have been a need for House Bill 4134. And lastly, it's important to make sure that most Oregonians and all legislators understand and value what you're doing to save species and habitat. Some skeptics think this money will go away or it will be siphoned to other purposes. So these efforts need to be appreciated by all, and that's going to require different ways to reach different audiences. So I suggest that one staff person is not enough to handle the communication and outreach. If you don't tell and sell these stories soon and often, the funding source may be at risk. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. Stan. Stan, I think you don't have to turn on your microphone. I think these will pick you up,
Oh, okay.
I believe.
Chair Wall, Commissioners, Director Colbert, Vice Chair Hyde, and Stan Steele. Just a local hunter and fisher trapper, farmer game warden and guide, policy and process advocate. Been involved with EBAC. That was the old name. Decades ago. I mean, decades. We were on EBAC, sat and listened through worked through all the budgetary processes. You guys did a good job with this one. We don't always agree on maybe where specific funding goes, or maybe even the dollar amounts or minimums or maximums. But when we look at the breadth of our program, it talks about everything. And Director Colbert's gonna, and Chair Wall is gonna laugh. I've always talked about everything from bulls to butterflies. This budget does that. Yes, we were wanting to be really cautious about the transit lodging tax going in. Some of us are conservatives, and we're always want to know what a tax is going to do, where it's going to go, and who's going to benefit. And so as we see the whole process getting going, we start realizing this is going to help everything for bulls and butterflies. At that point, the Oregon Trappers Association, Oregon United Sporting Dogs Association, the Oregon Anglers Alliance, all said, this is a good pathway. This is the trail we want to follow. So I think when I look at those kind of things and our members look at it, we realize this is an agency that's trying to stick to mission and the wildlife policy, all the different co-equals. And what a complex job that is. How do you really do that and make everyone happy and not someone saying that hatcheries are just concrete, rebar, and steel? There's so much more in that. That's a cold soul. Let's look at what those hatcheries do for little towns like Alcee, where they've lost their Forest Service. The timber jobs are gone. It's not an agricultural valley. There's a few cows. It is now a bedroom community. And it's just a shadow of what it once was. Rock Creek probably isn't, or the Umpqua Valley is not in that same situation because it's a larger metro, a lot more industry. But these hatcheries matter. They absolutely, a trout hatchery in Oregon brings in $15 for every dollar invested. That is economic engine that isn't going to be replaced by anything else other than tourism that is drawn to trying to catch what some refer to as a pellet. I grew up on the Lieberg hatchery. They're far more important than someone referring to them as just something that demeaning. Look at a 12-year-old kid watching his red and white bobber, and the first thing that he sees is a 10-inch hatchery trout on the end of that line. We had a slogan for years. We hatch them, you catch them. And the old timers that worked for ODFW can understand that. My time's up, but I just want to say this. The department is working under difficult challenges from climate to budget. We are going to be there as stakeholders, and at times we'll agree to disagree. But we're all in this from bulls to butterflies.
Thank you, Stan, especially for that line. That's great. Go ahead, Alex.
Morning, commissioners, Director Colbert. Thank you for this opportunity to testify on next finance agency requested budget. My name is Alex Hardison. I represent fish screening conservation interests on the agency's fish screening task force, and I'm here today as a concerned conservation-oriented angler. I live here in Central Oregon, but I spend a week each year down on the North Umpqua. And for the past 3 days, I've been snorkeling in Steamboat Creek, swimming with wild steelhead, and reflecting on the significance of this system for wild recovery and the health of the watershed. And so I think the implications of this funding for you are so significant that I really felt inspired to make the trip back home and appear here before you today. My request, as others have, is to ask that you remove the Rock Creek Hatchery Top 117 from this budget and defer decisions on new hatchery investments until review of the coastal multi-species conservation management plan is complete. 3 concerns drive my request. First, I believe this decision is premature. CMP review is intended to guide this choice, and as I said, it's not finished, and there's no current production emergency. Secondly, the statewide hatchery system is already contracting due to the high costs of operation. For instance, ODFW just closed the Salmon River hatchery because it couldn't sustain operating costs. And POP 117 would add new facilities and new operating obligations to the same system. Finally, I believe that committing such substantial funding to rebuilding Oregon's lowest ranked hatchery comes at the expense of investments in habitat restoration, fish passage, and monitoring that have been proven to actually drive meaningful wild recovery. So I'm heading right back down to the Umpqua right after this for the weekend, and I personally want to know that the investments that the state and this agency are making in the watershed will sustain wild fish, fisheries, and so I'm asking you to remove POP 117 from the budget. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Alex. And that, with you two, concludes our public testimony.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So commissioners, let's call staff back up. And we can go through more questions. Take just a minute for commissioners to figure out what their questions are, because I bet there are some. Commissioner Labhart, would you like to start?
Sure. Thank you, Chair Wall. So first of all, I'd like to start by thanking staff. This is our second bite at the apple. We had a workshop for us after the public review process. So, and we did provide some input into you. You made some changes as a result of that second bite at the, or our first bite at the apple. I really appreciate the multiple public processes you went through with webinars, with addressing individual concerns that were out there. Thank you very, very much for that. There's a lot of work that went into this budget. It's a big budget. And I think you did an excellent job of addressing some of the concerns that are out there. So first questions are related to POPs 101 to 104, which is essentially the TLT. So, and I've given staff some of these questions ahead of time to try to help speed process. So I guess, Ken, first question is for you. Is the projected transit lodging tax funding approximately $65 million for the biennium?
Chair Wall.
There you go. You got it.
Commissioner Labhart. Yes. So couple things. So for 27-29, I'll break it down. Sean had it in his slides. The 4 buckets, it's 55.7 million, 3.1 million, 3.1 million, and 1.2 million for $63.1 million in funding for 27-29. The tax does come into effect on January 1st, 2027. So we're going to accumulate some revenue in this current biennium. So if you add the projected revenue this biennium, we get up to like, oh, I got it right here, about $68.1 million. So our package is for $65 million, but projected revenues, if you include 25-27, is about 68.
Okay, thank you. That clears it up for me. I've received several questions about the department's proposal to add 88 new positions across POPs 101 and 104. How would you explain the need for this amount of additional positions to our constituents? And I don't know if Sean or you would like to respond to that.
I'll start and then you can jump in. Chair Wall, Commissioner Labhart. We've talked about it here today a lot, and it's come up in other meetings that we feel our most powerful resource is our staff, right? Debbie said it before, our superpower is collaboration, and I agree, but you need people to perform that work. I can also tell you, like, if from an existing staff workload, like, we're stretched very thin. And so, like, if we add the layer of expectations and complexity on our existing staff workloads, we're just not going to be successful. And so I think the positions are critical to the successful implementation of House Bill 4134. Other things for context I want folks to remember, or maybe you don't realize, is that it wasn't that long ago where the department had this level of positions within our budget. So during the 2013-2015 biennium, the department had approximately 100 full-time employees, more than we do today. 2013-15 was kind of the time, the time when we had some budget challenges, and we went through a really painful exercise with reducing positions and also increasing fees. We went through that again last biennium, and we've talked about the scarcity, right? Like, we've really been lean and mean, and have really our total position count has gone down significantly over the last decade. Now, all these positions coming back aren't like for like from where we were 10 years ago, but it's just a good reminder that it wasn't that long ago where the department had this capacity. And again, that 2013-2015 really kickstarted this thought of, like, we need alternative funding, because we can't support all of the pressures on the agency and all the needs for conservation off of those existing resources. And so here we are today with its funding package, huge opportunity. But I'll just sum it up and say, our staff, there's no way we'd be successful in implementation without having staff to do that work and carry that load.
Chair Wall, Commissioner Lab, just to build on what Ken's saying, I think take a step back and think about this is an agency currently of 1,300 FTE, and that 1,300 FTE is essentially doing work funded by hunters and anglers, and really been focused on the game side of things. And what we're talking about here is building out a whole third leg of the agency that's really focused on at-risk species, non-game species, with an additional 89 staff, which 89 staff in comparison to 1,300 FTE is a really small amount, right? It's a big package for sure on its own, but when you think about it in the context of the rest of the agency, it's actually quite small. And when you think about the work that's going to need to get done, we need people out there that are monitoring these species, understanding their limiting factors, understanding their status, understanding where they are. And that informs everything we do going forward. And you can't do that without people on the ground. And then, as we've heard in all the tours this year, and you get to see how staff are working together, like our wildlife diversity biologists, our habitat biologists, our wildlife biologists, they're all working together with partners to get projects done on the ground. And again, you can't do that if you don't have people in these positions. So really important that we have internal capacity to do this work. And I'll just highlight that, for example, when we had this huge potential injection of funds with IRA and IIJA recently from the federal government, it's really clear that if you don't have capacity to develop those relationships with landowners, get projects going, having funds to put projects on the ground just doesn't pan out. You're left with this bottleneck where you can't develop projects. So that's a few things I'd say about this, the need for these positions.
Okay, thank you. I think I heard the answer to this question, but I'll still ask it. How much of the TLT funding will be directed to on-the-ground conservation and management objectives? What is the dollar amount?
Chair Wall, Commissioner Laphart. So the dollar amount for the big TLT Pop 101, $22.8 million is for personal services for staff. 34.2 million is what's called service and supply funds. So that's non-staff costs. Of those 34 million, so that's the 40%, 60% split that we've heard about earlier today. Within the package, and what Sean did a great job of describing today, is $25.3 million in already identified projects or funding for directly for on-the-ground implementation of projects that benefit species of greatest conservation need. Of that remaining SNS, there is some chunks that will be spent on internally on staff, like we need vehicles, we need supplies, we need computers, all those good things to do the work. But there's still a big chunk of that is going to be going to the divisions, going to the regions where there's some flexibility to work with partners and and do more than what more projects and support more efforts even than what's already been identified. So exact numbers, at least 25.3, but probably closer to 30. And then if you incorporate the POPs 102, 103, and 104, right? OCRF, one position funded that minus that position out, we have $3.1 million of funding. That's all to on the ground efforts. Wildlife connectivity, 3.4 million, all on the ground efforts. And then stewardship, that $250,000 that Sean mentioned for supporting wildlife rehabilitation. So you add all that up. I lost my track with my notes, but it's, a significant amount of funding that's going directly on the ground. And the ratio is less than 50% staff, way more than 50% for on the ground stuff.
Several groups have expressed concern about the proposed TLT investment in additional Chinook salmon production intended to benefit the southern resident orca. In 2023, this commission directed the department through OAR process to pursue funding for increased hatchery production for salmon stocks that the southern resident orcas are likely to encounter. In response to concerns raised by several groups, the department has recommended removing TLT funding from the TLT POP and is exploring alternate funding options. That's given. So I'm going to assume that funding will be secured from a different source to comply with commission direction. Is that a true statement?
Sure. Well, Commissioner Labhart, yeah, we as a department still feel that's important work to get done. It's in the recovery plan for southern resident orca. It was in the rules that commission adopted a couple of years ago. So yeah, it is our intent to look for a fund shift option to continue.
And it's approximately 500,000 or neighborhood.
It's actually smaller than that. It's around 345,000.
Okay. Thank you. The budget assumes federal funding will remain stable. That's your words, I think, Ken, during the next biennium. Given the recent trend in declining federal support, what is the basis for that assumption?
Sure. Well, Commissioner Labhart, basis for that is simply we've had no indication otherwise, right? We've had uncertainty, things that keep us up at night. But we've gone through this process once already with the federal government, and everything was X'd out last year with the president's budget. Everything was returned through the legislative process. We've got really good signals and support from the federal delegation. And there's a couple of things that also feed into that. That are to our benefit is that we have a lot of our federal funding and permanent programs is protected through federal acts, Sportfish Restoration Act, Pittman-Robertson Act, Mitchell Act, or funding is associated with mitigation from the federal federal hydropower system. So things that have to occur. There is always a higher level of stress or scrutiny when it comes to like discretionary funds, things like Pacific Coast Salmon and recovery funds. Or some of the other funds that come through NOAA for salmon recovery. But I think it goes back to like our support of the legislature. We also have really good support at the federal level, and this funding is critically important for a variety of things, not just us, but the impacts economically to commercial to recreational, all above. We have really good support. So I don't have anything, ironclad that says absolutely we're going to have all of our funding in place, but we also haven't heard anything to tell us that something is at significant risk either. Heard a little bit about some of the actions last week with Bonneville Power Association. So that is federal fund. I almost think that BPA I treat it a little different from our federal funding. I mean, that's contracted work, and how should I say this? There's been challenges with BPA and some other federal funds for years when it comes to just not keeping pace with inflation, right? I think that remains to be a concern at the federal level of like, are we getting the funds consistent with the inflation that's going on to do the work? And we continue to have that normal back and forth with all of our federal contractors. But in general, base level funding, big picture, I feel okay about where we're at with the caveat that there's still continued uncertainty that'll keep me up at night.
Okay, thank you. I think this next one's a yes or no question. Does one of the POPs include funding for the Marine Resource Coordinator position to address ongoing challenges facing Oregon's marine ecosystems? It's in there, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. POP 102 Wildlife Stewardship reference additional support for wildlife rehabilitation centers, including the grant program. Specifically, how much has been allocated to the grant program?
Chair Wall, Commissioner Labhart, 250,000 in that policy.
Okay.
And Chair Wall, Commissioner Labhart, I just kind of reiterate my earlier comments that we are proposing that 250,000, so 200,000 in permanent ongoing funding, 50,000 from the carryover from this biennium. And then additionally, we mentioned that for those 4 positions that are associated with that policy option package, it will probably take some time to hire them. So we may accrue vacancy savings, and we intend to put those vacancy savings into that initial grant program offering.
Good idea. Okay. Okay, thank you. Pop 102. In addition to other funding for wolf-related issues, I'm particularly pleased to see the additional funding dedicated to the wolf specialist position, working with communities and producers where wolves have expanded into other areas of the state. That's just a comment. And I think it's going to be in Klamath Falls, correct? Is it?
Yeah, Chair Wall, Commissioner Labout, that's correct.
Okay, thanks. I also appreciate the additional staffing dedicated to improving our ability to address human-wildlife interactions and conflicts in Oregon's urban and suburban communities. This has been a longstanding need, and I think the commission has been pretty strong in pushing for that. So really appreciate the effort you're putting into urban habitat biologists and suburban habitat. Papa 103, just a comment. I strongly support the 3.4 million investment in wildlife connectivity. Oregon has lagged many other western states in this area, and it is encouraging to see the increased attention and resources dedicated to improving habitat connectivity and wildlife crossing. So kudos there. 104, I'm pleased to see the 3.1 million in dedicated funding for the Oregon Conservation and Recreation Fund. I'm a big supporter of that, as you well know. The program has demonstrated its value over the past several years. During most of the recent grant cycle, OCRF has received 100 applications, reflecting a significant demand for these funds. It's also noteworthy that the program has attracted approximately $600,000 in private donations and demonstrating broad public support. So thank you for getting that in there. Pop 105, shellfish monitoring. I support the additional staffing to conduct more frequent clam stock assessments. There's been an increasing question and concern regarding both recreation and commercial harvest levels along the coast. It is essential that we maintain healthy and sustainable clam populations for the future. So appreciate that pop. Hatchery Pop 111. Kudos to the department for commissioning the comprehensive independent assessment by a third party. And Sean, you deserve a huge amount of credit for the work you've put into that. By assessment by third party experts in economics, infrastructure, and fisheries biology. The resulting roadmap provides an excellent foundation for the long-term operation and management of Oregon's hatchery system. So that's kind of our guiding document. Additional comments. The Rocky Mountain Bighorn sheep and goats did not receive any funding in the initial 4134, even though they are identified as an important swap species. In the 23 years since the plan was last updated, the data collection and research on North American herds has grown, and it is likely to modify how Oregon's population should be managed to ensure their success across their ranges. This plan, in my opinion, is just as important as the mule deer plan update and the wolf plan update. And I understand, Sean, that you might have an update regarding this matter.
Yeah, Chair Wall, Commissioner Labhart, I'll say a couple of things on this. You mentioned there's no funding in POP 101 for bighorn sheep. As we were building that policy option package and talking with our partners on it, we were also looking at what other revenue sources were available to invest in these species. So for example, you just mentioned the policy option package associated with estuary surveys for clams. We heard from stakeholders that they wanted to see more capacity in the department for estuarine surveys for eelgrass, clams, et cetera. We didn't have to include that in POP 101 because we have that other revenue source associated with the shellfish license that has dedicated funding for that. So we're meeting that need, but in another way. Similarly, on the bighorn sheep, we have dedicated funding associated with bighorn sheep that we can use to take actions there. So we looked at trying to maximize our benefits through 101 in addressing species that don't have other sources of funding. In terms of the bighorn sheep plan, since there's been discussion about that, and you brought it up in the last commission meeting, staff have been working on kind of what it would look like to step towards that plan in terms of what are the actions we can take right now, and then what information do we need to populate that plan. A big piece of it is there's been an ongoing study amongst the Western states around the Movi virus and our kind of catch and remove strategy. We expect that to wrap up here soon and be a full analysis of that, which will really be important in guiding actions going forward. Staff have reached out to the Bighorn Sheep Foundation to set up a meeting here soon to just align with the Bighorn Sheep Foundation about what the steps are to take that plan update and get it in place. So yeah, there should be more to come on that front.
And that will happen fairly soon. Can't,
I think we're just waiting for a response to set the timing, yeah.
okay, thank you. I want to acknowledge the significant staff and public input that went into developing the mule deer management plan. I know it's a little bit sidebar, but as an implementation of this plan continues in the next biennium, I really look forward to seeing the continued progress toward restoring Oregon's mule deer populations and improving long-term health and resilience of the species. And then I'm going to close with the Rock Creek controversy. Now, I saw, the commission saw lots of emails, lots of letters, lots of testimony. There remains many steps to this process, and this POP is, I understand from staff, is an important placeholder that allows the department to continue working with the public user groups and tribes on a long-term solution. And I want to read a statement in POP 117. This package directly supports the department's mission to protect and enhance Oregon's fish and wildlife habitats for the use and enjoyment by present and future generations, securing resilient hatchery production through a resilient Umpqua River Basin hatchery complex ensures fishery opportunities into the future. Further partnering with the Cow Creek Band of Umpqua Tribe of Indians, build and co-manage the hatchery facilities in the Umpqua Basin continues the department's dedication to strengthening intergovernmental relations between the state of Oregon and the federally listed tribes in policy 100.004, by building a pre-existing MOA with the Cow Creek Band of Umpqua Tribe of Indians to cooperatively manage natural resources in the region. And then the department says on page 59, the department, furthermore, there could be complex negative cultural, social, and economic impacts by eliminating hatchery production that currently contributes to cultural connections to the natural resources that are critical to the Cow Creek Band of Umpqua Tribe of Indians and the residents of the region, as well as local economies. Could you elaborate on that for me? Because I mean, what we're doing is we've got, it looks like different dichotomies here on a viewpoint, and I'd really like your staff opinion on this, you know, as we move forward with that one.
Sure. Well, Commissioner Lava, that's a really broad question. I will say that the path forward at Rock Creek Hatchery since 2020 and the Labor Day fires has been one of the most complex issues that I've been involved in my time with the agency. There's so many moving parts to this conversation, so many concurrent processes that have been going on, and so many kind of starts and finishes along the way that we're still some ways from understanding fully like where this is going to end up. And so to your point, like this is a placeholder to allow us to continue moving down that pathway. In terms of the like public conversation around this, a long history of kind of competing interests on what the vision should be for this this basin and in particular Rock Creek Hatchery site, and kind of what we're proposing is really based on the review. And I will just point out that the resilience review we did was really looking at the state of the hatcheries as they were at the time and thinking about like what are the vulnerabilities, what are the risks, and what needs to be done to make it more resilient. And it's true that Rock Creek rated quite low in terms of resilience, but it's the Rock Creek that was in place at the time, right? Not the Rock Creek that we're potentially proposing to rebuild, which is a very different scenario than what it looked like 10 years ago. So we're hearing a lot of those concerns. The concept we're outlining is really, in our opinion, consistent with the resilience review. We're spreading that risk across multiple facilities, Rock Creek, South Fork facility, Elk River, and Coal Rivers. We're not concentrating on a full rebuild at Rock Creek. That was one of the options we considered and discounted because it was cost prohibitive and didn't meet the resilience requirements that we have. So we've considered a range of alternatives, and we kind of landed on this concept of what you see, which is a partial rebuild at Rock Creek, where we're putting in infrastructure that can rear half of the spring Chinook program, as well as trout production, moving the coho and winter sealer production in basin in the South Umpqua, continuing to use Elk River and Gardner Reed Spot Steppe for the fall Chinook, and then continuing to rely on Coal Rivers for half of the spring Chinook production. And that, in our opinion, is making the best use of the assets we have and meeting the challenges that we know are present in the North Umpqua Basin and the Umpqua Basin in general. So I think I've maybe addressed some of your question, but if there's parts of it there that I've left out, happy to follow up.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just making sure that everybody gets to ask the question. So go ahead, Commissioner Spellbrink, and then we'll come back and have people identify what they want to be changed or what they would recommend. So go ahead, Commissioner.
I'm glad that came up on Rock Creek there and yeah, I'm not sure we have time here today to so I kind of like the idea of as a placeholder and then, you know, get all the details worked out. Funding wise, on the funding sources. Now, you've got the insurance, FEMA money. Does the FEMA money go away if it's not used in the basin?
Yeah, Chair Wall, Commissioner Spellbrink. This is one of the complexities of this process too, is that various funding sources and what the eligibility is. So I think you heard in testimony today that there's potentially this choice that the department has about whether we invest in the proposal and infrastructure at Rock Creek or we do something else with that funding. And there's actually quite a few sideboards on a lot of this funding. So the insurance funding, again, is by statute has to go to rebuilding the lost functionality. If we were to spend that in other ways, we'd need legislative approval. The FEMA funding, again, is also intended to be used to replace lost functionality. So if we use that for some other purpose, it doesn't fit the sideboards of that funding. So the question really is, are we making the best use of the insurance funding and the FEMA funding into replacing lost functionality there? And that's where we came up with this concept of spreading out some of the risk. When you also look at potentially the insurance funding is the only fungible funding we have there that could be used for other purposes with legislative approval. But one of the options we looked at early on was decommissioning of Rock Creek. And if we were to decide not to move forward there, we would have to decommission it, take the ladder out. And in 2022 dollars, we estimated that was between 10 and 12 million. It's undoubtedly higher today. And so majority of that insurance money would have to be spent in decommissioning Rock Creek and it wouldn't be available for other uses. And then the other thing to keep in mind here is that while we're talking about Rock Creek Hatchery, it's really wrapped up in the funding for all the production. So the Spring Chinook, Winter Steelhead, Coho, not Coho, sorry, but Fall Chinook programs. And without that funding for Rock Creek operations, all of those programs go away, which leaves the Umpqua Basin with nothing. So it's a complex issue here. The funding has sideboards. We still have to submit our proposal to FEMA. Our engineers are working on our 60% designs currently. We plan to have those out to FEMA within the next month or so. We've committed to sharing those with the groups that you've heard from today. So once we have more on that design, we'll be sharing with it.
So to Commissioner Moldal and then Commissioner Morrison, and then I have a few questions too.
Thank you, Chair Wall. Like Commissioner Morrison, I feel very gratified to be on the commission during a period of abundance. And it's a perspective that I'm just personally gratified in. And we've got such opportunity before us with these investments. However, we should not underestimate the challenges before us in terms of ship hydrograph, climate change, invasive species, land fragmentation, on and on and on and on and on. So I see this investment as well-timed and very gratifying. I would normally not read my comments, but given the magnitude of the issue involving POP 117, I'm going to do that. So I want to express my sincere gratitude to the director and all department staff for the transparent, hard work preparing and presenting the agency requested budget. In addition, I want to underscore the inclusive and open public budget meetings that were hosted to engage Oregonians, conservation partners, and to document the outpouring public comment, which is all beyond impressive. Generally, I could not be more impressed to see the proposed policy option package proposals to recover Oregon's wildlife through comprehensive investment in a statewide capacity to implement the State Wildlife Action Plan. These are long overdue investments in department capacity that will lead to a collection of critical knowledge, essential planning and partnering, and tangible and measurable improvements to wildlife and terrestrial and marine habitats they depend upon. However, as we've heard a lot, this morning. One proposed policy option package, POP 117, hatchery capacity for the Umpqua Basin, gives me serious pause in wanting more detail. The very concerning issues about the watershed's declining water quality and quantity, which is well documented, and other troubling land use in this watershed notwithstanding, this proposal to expend at least $76 million to partially rebuild the Rock Creek Hatchery, one of the least resilient hatcheries in Oregon, and to build a new hatchery on the South Umpqua lacks detail about new hatchery siting, securance of water rights, as well as specificity about capital and operation costs that are needed to make a fully informed decision. We're at a time of significant financial inflation and uncertainty, which makes me very concerned that we're greatly underestimating the capital and operating costs of these proposed public investments. It is incumbent that this commission make sound financial decisions, especially those with lasting financial fisheries management and conservation impacts. I don't feel with the information concerning POP 117 that we can do that today. Chair Wall.
Commissioner Morrison.
Well, thank you again for all of the information. And there's so much detail here, so many policy option packages to discuss. I have maybe one or two questions about packages other than 117, and then I'll come back to that one. For POP 105, the shellfish nearshore related package, there's a funding in there for a position to do outreach, in essence, to, it sounds like to me, recruit more folks to be involved in shellfish harvesting, which is great. I'm just curious about the geographic scope of that work. Will that be focused along the coast? Will it be focused in population centers? I'm just thinking of the serving all Oregonians focus.
Chair Wall, Commissioner Morrison, the intent of that position and all of those positions actually in the policy option package is to be coastwide from Southern Oregon to Northern Oregon. And the outreach position would work similarly to a lot of our angler ed and hunter ed instructors, where they work across a broad geography and they're putting on workshops, hosting trainings, getting people engaged in shell fishing coastwide. So it's pretty broad geography. They'd be based out of Newport, but doing work coastwide.
Great, thank you. Then maybe just quickly on POP 106, the Columbia Basin Restoration Initiative. If I'm reading that right, that's just allowing us the authority to accept these private funds that are coming in. And if I read it right, there's a couple million that's coming in from those grant sources or philanthropic sources. We're only asking for about $500,000. Is the rest of that money going to tribes and to the state of Washington for the CBRI?
Chair Wall, Commissioner Morrison, yes, that's correct. I think $2 million goes to the 6 sovereigns. Our portion of that is $500,000 to do implementation work throughout within Oregon.
Great, thank you. All right, and then maybe just quickly coming back to POP 117, which we've heard a lot of testimony on, and thank you to others who have really appreciate everybody who sent in comments on that. It's great to see the level of interest and engagement in healthy fish populations in the Umpqua Basin, regardless of what side folks might be on. I guess as I've listened to folks and read through all the information around it, what I'm still a little unclear on, and maybe you can help me clear that up, is when we talk about this being a placeholder, what exactly does that mean? If we don't move this forward, are we foreclosing the opportunity to continue the discussions? Certainly greatly appreciative of the work that the department has done in working with the Cow Creek Band. That's really important. Thinking about the future of the Umpqua Basin through the CMP, et cetera, et cetera. Are we foreclosing an opportunity if we don't move forward, particularly the partial rebuild of Rock Creek, which is, I think, where a lot of the concern is?
Yeah, Chair Wall, Commissioner Morrison, that would essentially be what happens and it's similar to the position the legislature was in last session, where operating funds for that facility were not included in the agency budget, which meant that if we didn't have operating funds restored through the legislature, those programs would essentially cease to operate. So the coho, winter steelhead, spring chinook, and fall chinook would have ceased to operate. And it also would have put an end to our conversations with the Cow Creek tribe about the complex going forward. So when we talk about a placeholder, we recognize that there's still a lot to work through. We've got to work through with the tribe about what that South Fork facility might look like and what their obligations would be. We've got to work through with FEMA about where they would be on the funding proposal. And internally, we've got to work on the operating expenses for ODFW for a Rock Creek facility. So there's a lot still to come in this process, and similar to where we were with the bridge funding from the legislature in 2025, 27, there just needs to be more time for these conversations to play out to finalize what the proposal will actually be. And I anticipate that that will probably come to a head in the legislature next year.
Sorry, just to put a fine point on it, our conversations with the Cow Creek would stop if this POP does not move forward.
Yeah, Chair Wall, Commissioner Labhart, we would be in somewhat uncharted territory here because, yeah, without this policy option package in our budget, it would mean that there's essentially no operating expenses for the next biennium. So the commission by default would have made a decision about those programs, but also about the ability to operate Rock Creek going forward. So it would be challenging.
Thank you.
Are there other questions, Commissioner Morrison? No, okay. Commissioner Hall, please, and then.
Yeah, can I just maybe spin that another way? So through the adoption of the current full package, including 117, it would allow us to continue conversations on how that money is spent as a placeholder and continue conversations with tribes. Otherwise, basically, we would be saying, no, we're putting that to bed and those funds would be reallocated.
Chair Wall, Commissioner Hall DeFreeze, I think that's a good way of putting it.
I would just recognize, though, that this is all agency request budget. So if whether or not the commission approves 117 doesn't mean that the governor's office won't want the agency to continue to have those conversations. And whether or not the governor includes 117 in her budget doesn't mean that the legislature won't, because ultimately it is the legislature that will decide the use of these funds. So I just want to be honest about that and what it means today.
That's real helpful. Thank you.
Okay, maybe I start with Rock Creek since that's a theme. That's not on my list of, it's microphone. No. I think we've got to work around, right? Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
So I'll start with Rock Creek, not because that is the top on my list here, but because it's on my list. I support us leaving this POP in, not because I think that it's a done conversation, but because I think it's a conversation that as Oregonians, being respectful and taking the time to work through these issues, we need to give it the time it deserves. What we know, what I know from being on this commission for a lot of years now, is that down in the Umpqua, we have a variety of interconnected issues that are causing a lot of pain across the spectrum. And I also challenge the people in this room or online who love that region, that you remember to figure out how to come together. Figure it out, right? And pay attention to what is shifting and what is changing and what has changed and what has shifted for or against your position just in the last 7 years. So coming out of the Klamath Basin, where we have learned the hard way that you will listen to tribes, it feels unacceptable to me for us to not include this POP right now. It is unacceptable. to the first people of that region to not allow this conversation to move forward. So that's my piece on Rock Creek Hatchery. I'm gonna scratch that one out. I'm not as good as Commissioner Labhart, who always has it like totally organized and pulled together. Back to the large package. A question that I have is, I had the same question as Commissioner Labhart about just the sheer number of positions that we are adding to the department versus on the ground work. My question is, are our positions in Oregon going to be, will that be counted as match for federal dollars? The fact that we have these state positions being put on the ground?
Chair Wall, Vice Chair Hatfield Hyde. Yes and no. So the number of positions, right? Like that doesn't feed in. I can't like apply to the federal government and say we have X amount of positions, but we can use the salary we pay our positions as match, right? In kind match. So certainly we do that all the time, right? Like a grant opportunity, there has to be a certain amount of state match, 25%, whatever it is. And we can do that a variety of ways, including using our expertise, the work that we do on the ground as that match. So through that and through the cost of these positions, yes.
Okay. Thank you. The second question about that, because I'm very worried about, there's huge opportunity still today with federal match. We know it, especially with like, for example, NRCS programs that, or NIFWIF dollars, or, you know, if we as a state have the ability to bring some match, then we can get so much work done on the ground at a landscape scale. So that matters to me that we keep that. And I know you guys think about those things a lot more than I do. The other curiosity I have, and maybe this is for you all, but it's also for Commissioner Labhart, who is our OWEB conduit. Are we keeping OWEB in the loop? Is OWEB going to be a clear partner as we prioritize what is most important for swap species? How are we using OWEB dollars in the state to really further these initiatives in the future?
I actually think I can answer that question if that's okay. Since I'm the voting member on OWEB from the commission, is almost every meeting the swap comes up and OWEB is making it a priority to fund, because this has been approved by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and it hasn't received funding in the past for these at-risk species. OWEB is making a priority to fund the swap projects with OWEB dollars and match other sources. So it's important.
Okay,
Sure.
better. We're watching you.
Okay.
All right. Okay, you have a comment?
Just to add to that, yeah, Chair Wall, Commissioner Hatfield Hyde. So when OWEB goes through their planning process to understand where they're going to focus their investments, one of the considerations is input from us in terms of where our priorities are for both salmon steelhead. We provide them maps on our priority areas, and then for swap species as well, like where we want them to focus their investments. And that's part of information they use to decide where their FIPs are going to be. And then secondly, we're on the review teams for all those proposals. And so we share our feedback with the different proposals with the OWEB board, and it goes forward for their consideration. So there's a number of ways that we make our feelings heard.
Okay, good. And I just think that this is suddenly shifting the universe in Oregon, right? Ooh, this level of funding coming in. And so just being in alignment with OWEB and being, focused, I think is going to be important. And then the last one is I'm going to go way down into the weeds here. In the Eastern ecoregion, I don't have the POP number, but you are proposing $1.7 million to incentivize virtual fencing to restore habitat connectivity and support operations. I would love to see that broaden out and just have it as a placeholder called Restore Habitat Connectivity, because I think there is huge opportunity right now. There's a very big gap in Oregon in funding and matching federal dollars around conservation leasing and conservation easements in Oregon. We have we are in the hole, BOWEB, as far as funding that kind of work. We have so much more demand just in the east side ecoregion of needing to match conservation leasing. If that could just be left as a little broader statement, I think those dollars could be used in ways that are more effective. And that was just an example of where we're seeing a lot of loss. Also, I think that, and this is me going into the weeds again. For those of you that went on the tour yesterday, I like virtual fencing. I think it's a really cool idea. It does you no good if you don't have really good water in place, because livestock needs water. So you can put collars on everything you want, but there's more problems to it that go with it. So if that could just be broader, I think it would be good. And I also think there's virtual fencing funding out there in other places, which Commissioner Halder-Freeze knows a lot more about than I do. But anyway, that's way into the weeds statement. I don't know if we can make that broader or not.
Chair Wall, Commissioner Hatfield-Hyde, this was a concept that was developed by Sarah Reif, our Habitat Division Administrator, and I think, just given the timing that it comes together, the goal of that concept is really clear, right? It's to promote rangeland resilience and invest across the range of programs that are really important. This is where I talked about we've got a year to figure out the details of that.
Good.
And what that actually is kind of on the ground to fund. So I think there's certainly scope for thinking more about that.
Okay.
And I would also add that on top of that rangeland resiliency, there's 1.5 for each of those 4 ecoregions.
Right.
That can also go to those conservation easements. So, it's additive to that as well.
Right. Okay. I'm still living in the scarcity of reality. And then just the last thing that I want to say is just like a statement to Ken. My gosh. Wow.
This guy is actually loads of numbers.
And Sean too. I mean, Commissioner Labhart has asked some random question like, how much money do we have for blah, blah? And you're like, 220,000.
Well, I gave the questions to him ahead of time, so that's.
No, don't do that.
I didn't want to catch you off guard.
You don't. Here I am trying to compliment her really. Okay, aside from that, even though, amazing you guys to try to pull this together. I mean, actually, could we give them a round of applause for that?
Yes.
Thank you.
Just say thank you, and team effort all around, a lot of the folks behind me, a lot of hard work from everybody. So thank you.
All of y'all.
Thank you. You have more questions? No.
I'm going to ask a few questions that are not related to 117, if I could. So my first question was on the PFA, and I believe that you, Director, already answered that we have conversations still to go with the governor's office and that sort of thing. So I think it's really important. That's $10 million from state funds. It's part of a larger deal. It was really important, and it's really important to us for water and a bunch of other stuff that we count on. So thank you for the answer earlier. On the positions, I just want to mention one thing on those. Our staff capacity, I think you said, Ken, it's our superpower, or it's one of our superpowers, and I couldn't agree more. These are discussions that rely absolutely on the judgment, the skills, the expertise of staff. And I appreciate what the agency did to recognize what it's going to take to implement this well. I mean, besides how you put this together in a few short weeks, which I still don't know how you managed to make it happen and be so cogent and so useful. But we rely on staff, and I appreciate that you asked for what it would take to get this off the ground. So I do have a couple other questions, though. This first one is to you, Sean, I believe, because I want to ask a question that is sort of big picture about water. and where it fits. There were comments about how important water was to all the species in SWAP and all the habitat. And I want to just, if you could just give a bit of your take on how that priority is built into these POPs for 4134. How protecting cold water and cold water sources is built into these, because I think it is in some places, but it would be useful to hear your take on that.
Yeah, Chair Wall. So cold water and protecting water, flow restoration has been a focus for the agency for the last several biennia, recognizing the needs going forward, some of the challenges with climate change. And the agency's really had a focus for the past several biennia on building up our water program. We've actually added 10 to 12 positions in the last 3 or 4 biennia. So as we looked forward at building capacity through POP 101, we were also looking at like where we've been building out the agency and where the gaps were in our department, and recognizing that we've been intentional about building out our water program. Our focus was on areas where we have gaps and we haven't been able to build up the programs. So that's why you don't see necessarily targeted investments in staff capacity. One area that I think James Frazier brought up earlier is that even though we're not proposing flow restoration biologists, we are looking at potentially some of those geographies like the John Day, Northeast Oregon, where flow is a constraining factor. Having those NRS2 habitat biologists have some expertise in flow restoration, right? So we can build in capacity in that way in the skill sets that we hire. But then secondly, when you think about the on-the-ground work that's going to happen, there's 1.5 million in each of those ecoregions to do that on-the-ground work. There's the investment in our habitat biologists, the 2s and the 3s, that are going to be commenting on water use permitting. They're also going to be doing on-the-ground work, like the work with the juniper that we heard yesterday that's resulting in increased in-stream flows, doing riparian work on the coast. All of the work they're going to do is result in greater in-stream flows. So it's kind of woven into everything the agency's doing on the ground, as well as the existing capacity we have. So does that answer your question?
It does answer it, and it actually helps a lot in terms of how this is all building up. I have one additional question on the same, which is in the working land. We have talked a lot about working lands as well, and it's a key strategy that we have is to focus on that. Is there still a water focus in those working lands pieces?
Might have to phone a friend on this one, but Chair Wall, I believe there's still a focus on it. And again, go back to the tour yesterday, right, where a lot of those working lands on the east side are focused on like upland restoration, juniper treatments, et cetera, that are increasing like water retention on the landscape, but also the blue water. I'm going to start using the blue and green water. Blue water flows into the streams that are increasing that capacity. Similarly, on the west side, it goes back to what I said earlier about our habitat biologists and those working land biologists. They're doing work that's restoring riparian habitats, restoring the uplands that are resulting in increased water retention and increased in-stream flows. So yeah.
Thank you.
If Sarah's behind me and she's waving.
Okay. Thank you. That's really helpful. I have one other of these kind of big picture questions about, we have been working for years on beaver. We've been talking about landscape scale restoration for a long time and how much beaver can provide for us in different ways. So could you answer similar to the water question, and they're related clearly. It shows, if you could answer how much this work builds on that. And you already said earlier today that the Beaver Action Plan we'll hear more about it, and it's continuing. It's not something that we're going to stop after the first 3 years, but if you could talk about how that work remains and will build as a core effort for this agency.
Yeah, sure. Well, this question just kind of highlights how many different components there are in this budget package that all kind of fit together. And like when I talk about, answer your last question, I forget to talk about the beaver investments that we're proposing in POP 101. which relate directly to water and stream flows, et cetera. So in this package, we have one 3/4 time FTE that's really focused on implementation of the Beaver Action Plan. It's the agency's point of contact for all our biologists out there that are really helping align all of our staff with implementing the plan, but also working externally with partners. And you all know Adrienne Everett. She does a phenomenal job in that role. And we want to see that continue. So there's investment there. There's also the investment in on-the-ground habitat demonstration for implementation of the Habitat for Beaver guidance manual. And we're in this kind of in-between phase where we've finished the 3 years of the first action plan, and we're thinking about what the next action plan for Beaver is going to be. We're going to talk about that in the September meeting. But as part of that conversation, phase one of the action plan was really laying the foundation for putting all the pieces in place that we could start stepping up to landscape scale. Action plan 2.0 is really going to take it to another level of like, okay, we've got some of these foundations. What does it look like to put that in practice and start doing more landscape scale work? As we do that, we're now fortunate that we've got these dedicated funds where we can also actually do on the ground work, either ODFW led or partner led. So going back to the 1.5 million per ecoregion, that's a potential fund source for doing some of that landscape scale work. So the budget is really like all interwoven. It was all intended to work together, and you'll see various pieces of that. It's just hard to keep it all in your head.
If I could just add, Chair Wall, you also saw yesterday our, where we have habitat biologists that can help to do the beaver analogs. Again, to kind of slow down and spread out water and restore connectivity to areas. So again, all of that connected.
It does connect. And I think that that's one of the things that the department has done a remarkable job of, is keeping track of these and making them connect. It's OCRF has done that over the years. Other funding sources have done that over the years. We identify this landscape scale work with Beaver and what it can do for us, and then we keep track of ways that that's happening. So I just wanted to make sure that that was coming through in this one as well. And, we'll keep watching it. And I really appreciate hearing that the action plan 2 is the next level on the Beaver action plan. It's just the next phase, and it keeps it as core work. I do feel obligated to go back to POP 117 and talk about that a little bit. I appreciate the remarks that other commissioners have made on this. I wish that we didn't have to tally up how many hours we have lost in terms of sleep worrying about this one and trying to come to a good conclusion. There is so much in this budget that is headed in the right direction. We're unspeakably lucky to be in the position we are. On POP 117, for me, it comes down to there are just too many reasons not to rebuild and not to commit ourselves to the ongoing operations with so many questions in place on this one. In my view, we are, and this goes back to something one of the commenters said earlier, we're a hatchery state and we'll continue to be a hatchery state. It seems like we need to make good choices on these hatcheries, and we had the assessment. I recognize that we're looking at a different situation now with Rock Creek, but we had the assessment. We looked at this one. There are the problems that created it as the low resiliency hatchery then haven't gone away. So the low flows, the high temperatures before the fire, we'll have more of that. And so it seems like what we're looking at now isn't going to get a lot better. And it adds up to me to probably not moving forward. I recognize the incredible importance of collaborating with the Cow Creek and the other tribes. And I feel like this department has done a great job of that. But we have to choose if this is the right decision for our hatchery system at this time. And for me, it would be better to take this one out, or at least the Rock Creek part. So that's where I end up on it. I wish we only had all the good parts of this budget, but we have to weigh in on this one, and that's where I ended up on it. I think, whoops, we have some cards up. We'll go to the other cards and then we will get to some conclusions, I think fairly soon. So I don't know whose was up first. Bob. Commissioner Spellbrink.
Okay, thank you, Chair Wall. Yeah, I guess I'm on the other side of that coin. I support leaving Pop 117 in as a placeholder while we continue to look at our options. A couple other things is one thing that was mentioned. And Sean, do you know when we're going to start on the CMP updates? I know that's scheduled, and that was in the testimony. People said, you know, that was
Several
one of the things that we're looking at the same time.
Yeah, Chair Wall, Commissioner Spellbrink. So the CMP was adopted in 2014 and there's a intent for a 12-year review period, which starts in 2026. The first part of that review is really our science program, working on collecting all the information for the past 12 years, understanding the status, understanding again, like the limiting factors, and then incorporating some of the climate modeling to understand future statuses. So that work is actually underway on the science side of things. It encompasses data through this return year. So we're just kind of now getting some of those stock data back, right? That'll continue through this fall. And then we anticipate a conversation about the CMP review publicly early next year.
And then another, just comment, let's see, last I knew, we were raising spring Chinook at Rock Creek and Coal Rivers. Are we still doing that? Are they split?
Yeah, Chair Wall, Commissioner Spellbrink, since 2020, we've largely kept the production intact by utilizing other facilities. I will say it's put a strain on things. Coal Rivers was having challenges even prior to this, and adding more fish into the system has not helped the situation there, which is why it's not really a long-term viable solution to continue relying on Coal Rivers. But yeah, we have been mirroring the entire spring Chinook production there. In the last 2 years, we've shifted a portion of that back to Rock Creek just to try and understand what the capacity was to rear fish there without any additional investments. It's been really low densities, and so far it's been going okay.
Yeah, and I know, and we're acclimating spring Chinook smolts there.
Yeah, all throughout, even when we're rearing at Coal Rivers, we were acclimating. We've just shifted the last 2 years, like I say, to more year-round rearing for a portion of the program there.
Okay, great. Thank you. And anyway, I'm going to support leaving Pop 117 in as a placeholder while we continue to look at our options.
Commissioner Hall DeFreeze, and then Commissioner Labhart, and then Commissioner Moldall, if that one comes up.
I was actually just going to transition to comments and deliberation and then potentially a motion. So if other commissioners have questions that they want to ask before I do that.
I think we have basically transitioned, so you go ahead.
Okay. A couple quick things. I know we're all fading here, so I want to do this quickly. But one, I just want to double down again on how the capacity of the positions, as somebody who works really closely with translating dollars on the ground for conservation, restoration in many ways. Having positions gets money on the ground so much more efficiently and effectively. We've heard it all week. Partners, partners, partners. Just because money is going towards positions, I think that means that more money is going on the ground. So I just want to support the agency's decision in doing that and looking at it adaptively in the future too, and seeing where these investments lay. The other thing I'd say quickly, Vice Chair Hatfield-Hyde, because you brought it up, is I'm actually really excited about the virtual fencing because it's a multiplying factor for when conservation happens. When we put in water developments, we can make change immediately with that technology. We can look at grazing utilization so much more effectively with that technology. It's a big topic. As more changes happen at the federal level and on public lands that affect our wildlife habitat, I just think that's a really nimble way for us to look forward to. So I have to say that because that's my world. And then also just to say, I think also I'm will be supportive of keeping Pop 117 in there. I'm not comfortable closing the door on that yet. If anything, I've seen from this agency, we take comments very seriously and we adapt. And I think that will continue to happen in this case. I don't want to close the door on it yet. And I don't want to leave money on the table with FEMA money and insurance money without further discussion and thought process around that. So that I agree with Commissioner Spellbrink on that. So I'll leave there.
Commissioner Leibhardt.
Okay, so where I am on, whether we pull 117 or not pull 117 is a comment that question that Commissioner Hall DeFreeze asked you 2 times ago, which I think is the key question for us today on 117. Could you remember what you said? And I'd like Sean to repeat what you said, because I think it's critical for our decision making. So
I believe it was something along the lines of, if we leave it in there, we can continue to have discussions and decide where and how the money is used going forward, as opposed to if we take it out, those discussions are very limited. Am I close, Commissioner?
And so could you answer that question one more time for me, just to make sure I heard it correctly?
Yeah, Chair Wall, Commissioner Lab, what Commissioner DeFreeze said is accurate. Like, leaving it in is really a placeholder for us to continue those conversations with the tribe, to continue working with FEMA, and find a long-term solution here. With the caveat that what Director Colbert said, that regardless of the Commission's decision, like, there's still a governor's budget process to come. There's still a legislative process to come. So this is why it's a really complex issue. There's a lot of things to sort out, a lot of processes, steps yet to come.
Okay, thank you. We've been working on this for 6 years. So for those who said, oh, you're rushing it, we've been working on this for 6 years. So if we're not rushing it. So I lean toward keeping the options open in terms of keeping it on the table and looking forward. I don't know where it's going to go in the end, but if we take it out, it's gone. So I think I lean toward keeping it in. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Leibhardt. Commissioner Moldau.
Just one last question, comment first. So these are cost estimates, correct? We don't have bids. We're guessing on the costs of building a hatchery in the South Umpqua. So we're going to be wrong. The question is, I can't imagine costs will go down, costs will go up. Where will that money come from? How will we bridge the gap?
Chair Wall, Commissioner Moldau, yeah, it's correct. These are estimates, and they're actually based on kind of engineering estimates from a few months ago. Our engineers are in the phase of developing those 60% designs for FEMA, which will give us tighter cost estimates, and they're actually likely to come down for the time being, because what we're proposing here at Rock Creek site is really some modular investments, understanding that the future may change at Rock Creek. We didn't want to have permanent infrastructure that couldn't be used elsewhere if we needed. So some of the investments we're making will likely be cheaper than what we originally proposed. But then, of course, you've got to go through the process. And by the time you get to contracting and design it, inflation, it can always be more expensive. But the reality is that we've got the insurance funding, and then FEMA is committed to 90% of the unfunded project, which is the insurance funding. So regardless of whether that scales up, FEMA is still going to be paying 90% of it. And then the department's responsible for the other 10% of the unfunded project, which we're proposing to use with the capital bonding. So whether that scales up, there's still enough funding between the insurance, FEMA, and the bonding to cover those costs. The real challenge is in the ongoing operating costs.
Could I just ask a quick follow-up to Commissioner Moldau's question on that one? Because there were a lot of numbers in these, and I thought there was also a $15 million contingency in here for Rock Creek in case of inflation. So is that part of the discussion that you've been, because I haven't heard that one come up today, but that's suggesting that exactly what you're saying, I think, that there is a question about how much more it could cost.
Chair Wall, yeah. So our engineers always include contingencies in their construction estimates to allow for unforeseen circumstances. You know, a good example of that is when we worked at Klamath Hatch House recently, we got into the construction and we learned that the ground wasn't stable enough to support the facility. We then had to pause and invest $2 million in additional pilings to be able to build the facility. So they build that in up front, the contingencies, and they're usually pretty liberal with that. That's why it's $15 million. A lot of times it comes in under budget, but sometimes we do use all of that contingency. But we're also a long ways out from any breaking ground on anything, if that's the way this goes. And so they've made their best estimates, and they'll sharpen their pencils as we get to the 60% design. and improve those contingencies. But yeah, ultimately, when the bids come back, that's what tells you what it's actually going to cost. And like I said, we'll have the insurance, the FEMA will scale to that. And then our responsibility will be that 10% of unfunded FEMA match, which we're relying on the bond funding for.
Thank you, Commissioner Morrison.
But I guess I don't have a question, but since we're in the deliberation phase, I want to come back though to saying so much great stuff in all of these budget packages. Again, it's an amazingly positive time, and we're spending a lot of time talking about, you know, one particular package that, as you said before, Sean, extremely complex that you've been working on for a long time. We're all trying to wrap our head around it. I guess I wish there was a way for us to continue these conversations about what is the right path forward in the Umpqua Basin without appearing to commit to something that really is hard, at least for me, to commit to the rebuilding, even partially, of Rock Creek Hatchery because of all of the issues that have been mentioned around that particular location and that particular facility. So again, really badly want that conversation to continue, and confident that the department and our partners can get to a place where people feel good about where we are landing. I am a proponent of scientifically managed hatchery programs, but I can't support this idea of rebuilding, even partially, the Rock Creek Hatchery because of all the concerns that the department itself has raised and others have reiterated in their public comment and today. So I'll leave it at that.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you.
And then I'm going to try to wrap us up.
Yeah. So this is like just coming to me at the moment. I respect both sides of the Rock Creek Hatchery issue and the complexity, the greater complexity of the greater issues in the Umpqua. Director Colbert, you'll probably just be like, oh God, Becky, don't do death by process on me. But my larger concern continues to be the temperature of the issues in the Umpqua as a whole. And the lack of just calm in that region. I don't know what we can do as ODF&W to continue to bring people together to something that feels right there. Do you have any other ideas?
You know, I think that that's part of what we're trying to navigate with the very extensive conversations that have happened to date and that would continue. You know, so I feel like that's why it's been a not fast process to look at the different options and weigh those. And we would continue to do that regardless of, I don't know if Sean has any thoughts in terms of the continued conversations within the basin.
Yeah, so there's a few things at play here. One is like we're talking about hatchery capacity, right? Like separate from the programs. And we know that we're going to need capacity in the hatchery system to provide for these programs, whether they're conservation or harvest augmentation or mitigation. And the review is really set up to identify like what's the roadmap to provide whatever capacity we want in 20 years' time. And then separately, we've got this Rock Creek question where we've got insurance and FEMA money that we've got to make some decisions about how we're going to use. And we took the learnings from that resiliency review and applied it to spend that money or propose to spend that money in the most resilient way possible. Then we've got the programs themselves that we're considering, right? Which is in the Umpqua Basin, the Spring Chinook, Winter Steelhead, Fall Chinook. And that's really where the planning process comes in, the CMP review period that we're going to have here soon, where we consider like what the future of those programs looks like and put that in the context of the rest of the coast as well. Like our hatchery system can only has so much capacity. We want to put it in the places, put that capacity to use in the places where it's going to have the most harvest benefit, the most conservation benefit. So That CMP review process will be very public, will involve a lot of people, including all the people you're talking about. And that's where we'll really get to have the conversation about what those programs look like going forward. We know there's going to be some programs and we know we need hatchery capacity to rear them. So our job is to try and provide that capacity in a way that's most resilient.
Okay, thank you. So I would just say, by leaving this pop in, we are not committing to rebuilding Rock Creek Hatchery.
Chair Wall, Commissioner Hatfield-Hyde, or Vice Chair Hatfield-Hyde. I think by leaving this pop in, you're committing to allow the department to continue conversations with the Cow Creek tribe, the legislature, and our partners about where these investments are made.
Okay. And I think it's a really, it's a, sometimes a painful reminder to realize that we here at the ODF&W Commission are not always the supreme body of the state that gets to decide everything, as much as we would like to think we are. So I still say, let's just let this roll. It's been rolling a long time. And so probably we're about ready for a motion, huh?
We're getting close. We have one more comment and then I'm going to wrap this up.
Yep, sorry, just to double down on that question and to kind of clarify what Commissioner Morrison said, my understanding is if I am to vote for the package as is, I am not necessarily voting for Rock Creek Hatchery rebuilding or partial rebuilding. I am voting that that door is not closed and conversations are going to continue to happen, as you said, Sean, for what is going to build the most resiliency with all of the partners after the CMP is happening. Is that correct?
Chair Wall, Commissioner Helder Freeze, it's correct that I just want to be clear that the concepts that we're talking about with the tribe is a partial rebuild at Rock Creek, along with that investment in the South Fork, along with investments at Coral Rivers, like spreading the risk concept. There's a lot of details to work out about whether that is actually feasible to implement along the ways, but that's the concept we're exploring.
To get us to wrap up, I think that we should just deal with this one and then we can go back to the whole package. If that's all right with everybody. We, as several people have pointed out, first the director and then at least the vice chair, we weigh in, we the commission weigh in on this. We approve or don't approve the budget. The governor then takes this all and we're not the supreme being in this. We are just weighing in on, we are doing our job of approving or not approving the budget as it's presented to us. And once the governor gets through, then the legislature gets to take this. And there are going to be a lot of conversations. So what I suggest is that we've heard a sense of the commission. You could probably guess how people are going to land, but I think we should just have a vote on 117 and then we can move to the whole package. So maybe we could have a motion on whether or not to continue the discussion, whether or not to remove 117 in order to, and then the discussion stops, or we vote to leave it in which case it goes on as a placeholder.
I have a
Vice Chair.
recommendation. Could we just do a straw poll before a formal vote to get the sense of the commission on whether we would keep 117 in the package? So if you straw poll without going into lots of motions that we would probably have to write a motion and spend a lot of time with our lawyers and not get to eat lunch.
But
Keep
I guess the reality though is that if we just do the motion on Exhibit B,
You're gonna know.
if it either passes or if it doesn't pass, then we'll know that.
Okay, okay. So maybe a motion, maybe somebody just makes a motion.
I hear a motion.
I'll do a motion. But hold on. Maybe I will. Is this the right one? Okay. I move to approve the department's 2027-2029 agency request budget with recognition that further adjustments could be made by the department based on DAS Chief of Financial Office or Governor's Office guidance or as budgetary estimates are refined.
I will second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. what I was, the reason I was trying to butt in is just, it seemed like if we had made the motion about just 117, then that change, it lets us look at the whole budget without that question overriding it. And I think that I'm not enough of a parliamentary expert to say how we can go from here, but we have spent so much time on this that we should maybe just look at 117. Would you accept a friendly pause on your motion so that we can do that?
I think so, Chair Wall, but I think Commissioner Hatfield Hyde's point is if we vote as a commission to pass this budget, the decision is made instead of breaking up into potential two votes with more motions. And
it would be, but it doesn't give us a chance to really weigh in on this issue that's taken so much time. And I feel like we ought to get that chance to weigh in on this one.
I am perfectly happy to throw this thing out the door, this thing. I'm happy to rescind mine. If you have, Chair Wall, a motion prepared for just this, then I would respect you and we should vote on it.
So we have a motion that has been seconded.
And we rescinded it. We said we would rescind our motion for a minute here while we.
I think that, I mean, we're not super duper formal, so I think that's sufficient to go
Okay.
forward with a new.
So what is your motion, Chair Wall?
The motion would be, I move that we recommend against 117, and therefore the door would not be still open to have. Sorry, I move that we recommend removal of POP 117 from the budget.
And is there a second?
I'll second.
Any other discussion? Then let's have a voice vote on this one, if you will, Michelle.
Morrison,
Yes.
Modal,
Yes.
Hatfield Hyde,
No.
Hall DeFreeze,
no.
Spellbrink,
No.
Labhart,
No.
Wall.
Yes. Motion fails. We'll go to a vote on the budget. Is there, could you remake your motion?
Okay, let's see if I get through this a little bit more better. I move to approve the department's 2027-2029 agency request budget with recognition that further adjustments could be made by the department based on DAS Chief Financial Office or Governor's Office guidance, or as budgetary estimates are refined.
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded to approve the department's 2027-29 agency budget request, as was just read into the record. And we will have, is there any further discussion? Please no. Let's do a voice.
Modal,
Yes.
Hall DeFreeze,
Yes.
Spellbrink,
Yes.
Labhart,
Yes.
Morrison,
Yes, yes, yes.
Hatfield Hyde,
Yes.
Wall.
Yes. Thank you.
All right.
It is unanimous.
All right.
Thank you.
Just thank you. You are just a model. I mean, you put so much heart and thought and intention into everything you do as a commission, and just thank you for
Yes.
really taking the time to work through that budget. I really appreciate it.
Let's stop for a half hour for lunch. We'll try to keep it to that. If you want 45 minutes, I'm looking at the end of the day. It's going to be like 45 minutes. Okay, 45 minutes. Please be back by then and we'll start 15. Okay. Yep. All right. I think we'll go ahead and get started again. And just as fair warning, we have to clean the room and be out of here by 6. So I talk fast, it's going to get worse. So just be ready. We're going to go to exhibit item C, which is the Oregon Fur Bearer Trapping and Hunting Rigs. And so will the staff come up? And Sam talks fast. Oh, that's not Sam. Yes, it is.